What's up, guys? I hope you're doing well. Basically just looking into some more of the green energy kind of stuff, and just from an investment perspective, because it seems like it's kind of a, well, no, doesn't like. I was about to say it seems like it's a new trend, but it's not really that new, relatively, I guess. Anyways, I found this article, and let me switch to this so we can see it better. Okay, so Blackrock successfully invested in a green new future. Is solar investment the next biggest trend? And basically, they're going on about like BlackRock made a new ESG fund, which is like environment, social, and governance, or whatever the acronym stands for. But basically, they created a new fund that has this whole these ESG standards implemented within it. And basically, it says they induced a dramatic shift in the portfolios of other major players by inserting ESGU into influential model portfolios and investment advice. So they created a new fund, put that into their model portfolios that influence a lot of people and a lot of other funds and stuff, and also like basically and investment advice. So basically told everyone about it. um well, I know it's going to happen. So, and they also have a bunch of stuff about like how Tesla is believed to be will lose market share, or it is believed that Tesla will lose market share in the next few years, for like solar stuff and a whole bunch of other stuff. But the main reason I highlighted this section right here is one may argue that Tesla and Solar Integrated Roofing Corp (SIRC) are some of the most trendy green investment opportunities for the ESG curious investor that seeks to benefit from global conflict and high energy prices. Um, I just think it's funny. This is more just a comment on psychology in general, I guess. I don't even know if you deem it as psychology, but mostly, like I've seen many arguments about people who are like, how immoral it is from their, or whatever, however they deem morality in this case, or whatever. Um, about investing in like Russia and Ukraine right now, when especially in that initial invasion date, and then like everything just started tanking, especially in Russia, and some people talking about like how if you put capital in Russian equities, it's like supporting Putin and everything else, and how immoral it is to benefit or attempt to benefit from this kind of conflict. But if we put that into green energy, it's okay. It's just if we put it into Luke oil, it's not. Or insert Russian equity, that's not green. And but if we put it into American green energy stocks, all is well. It's perfectly fine. Um, just kind of a comment. Seems just it's one of those. Not I'm not surprised. Um, it's just something that I kind of chuckled when I read, because I just like pointing that kind of stuff out, seeing just how when the argument's pointed in a different direction, how someone's opinion drastically changes. Sometimes literally quite the opposite. So basically, investors are not only flocking to this space to feel good over the ESG ambitions, but rather to cash in on a new trend to replace dirty fuel and ensure Tesla charging stations not only have a monopoly over Americans. Okay, so you know what? I don't really have much of a comment on this one, because mostly I was thinking more along the lines of like the whole monopoly thing. And a lot of the times, with monopolies, people think like if you let a free market, well, let's start with this. It's arguable, and some would deem it truth, obviously, if it's arguable, that basically a monopoly is induced by a government, right? Because if you if you have a truly free market, then competitors will continuously come in and take market share, or will invent and so on and come better, or come back better than, say, whatever it may be. And I heard a really good argument for this by Peter Schiff. Surprise, surprise. um, but basically, it's like, with if you keep in like giving this, say you have like Standard Oil, like Rockefeller or whatever, the Standard Oil company, and you basically just keep introducing new competition, eventually that's just going to destroy them, right? At some point. Whatever. I don't want to get too deep down a rabbit hole. That's not the point of this. The point of this video. It's kind of just to go over this stuff. But yeah, and also it gives it an example of their fund and some of the equities that are in it, like Apple and Microsoft and Amazon, Google. I mean, I haven't looked too much directly into what they do in terms of green energy stuff lately, so I don't see how they or Home Depot is in there, JP Morgan Chase, like it seems kind of just like a regular fund with the usual tickers you get with mainstream stuff. But anyway, it's special. Remember that. In early 2020, Larry Fink, the CEO of Blackrock, announced that capital on a large scale was about to shift as the world moved towards a greener future, and that his firm would embrace this by making it easier to invest in companies with environmental, social, and governance practices that further this goal. Right? Okay. So, influential letters to CEOs. BlackRock is credited with being the primary driving force behind this shift due to the placement of its primary ESG fund, ESGU, into popular model portfolios and trusted investment advisors who subsequently advised their clients across the US to look into it. Specifically, if that's with retail investors, right? I mean, if you have an investment advisor, you're pretty much just going to do what they say, especially if you don't want to, like if you don't do it on your own, right? Because a lot of the times, there's some people who will definitely try to learn, and they do, and they learn and they teach themselves, and they actually they have an advisor to get that advice and everything else, not just do what they say. But there's also a lot of retail investors that just copy it. And they actually get into this later. So as a result of this placement, the ESGU experienced huge inward flows from these popular models. So basically a lot of capital flowing into their brand new fund that they got to tell everyone about. So as a consequence, many investors had been entered into an agent of ESG, mostly without consciously choosing this as a particular strategy of investment, or even knowledge that their money had gone towards backing such companies. I'll read that part again. As a consequence, many investors had been entered into an agent of ESG, mostly without consciously choosing this as a particular strategy of investment, or even knowledge that their money had gone towards backing such companies. Now, I'm sure in some cases this was due mostly through ignorance, meaning like they didn't look too far into it and so on, which I mean, like people have stuff to do. And I know a lot of that's what it seems like a lot of people with 401ks do. They kind of just, set it aside and forget about it. That's kind of more or less the point of a 401k is you don't really do much. And a lot of them you can't, from my understanding at least, you can't really do much about them. You have some different ones will give you what is it? It's like 7, or they'll give you a few options of kind of different weightings in different sectors or whatever you want to do. But besides that, it's kind of just like you don't you don't have ultimate control over it. I mean, you can kind of influence, but it's not like to the same degree of having your own brokerage account where it's just you as an individual doing your stuff. Because that takes a lot of time and a lot of research, which the vast majority of retail investors aren't willing to do, which isn't a negative comment against them in the least bit. It's more of just a statement of fact. I mean, like, not everyone wants to sit in front of a computer and look at like financial statements and a whole bunch of other data, just a lot of data to do that. That's just not what everyone's going to be willing to do, which it is what it is. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's the whole getting into investment without actually knowing. So that can both be from the investor, um, by not actually looking into it, um, and also just from the other side as well. I mean, like, I'm sure some of the advisors are aware that they're the people they advise just kind of blindly do what they say. Um, I mean, that's why they get paid. Which kind of brings me down to a little bit further down here, right? Apparently, like, the other hedge funds and stuff are looking at doing the same thing. So basically, what this fund does, from here, from this article at least, there are worries that the fund does not help with the environment through investment due to the metric through which the fund measures companies it considers sustainable, right? So they have this index that's basically based directly off of government regulation, it seems. I don't know if it's solely off of government regulation, but since they're bringing it up, I'd assume it's at least of some form significant, right? So it says the effect of potential government environmental regulation changes on each company's bottom line. And that's used as a means of, oh my lord, that's used as a means of assessing which companies are sustainable enough to deserve investment. Furthermore, if a company will be greatly hurt by government regulations meant to improve sustainability, they are necessarily not sustainable enough. Therefore, with this metric, the companies with the lowest scores must be the least unsustainable, the most deserving of the top spots in the ESGU fund. So at least a significant weighting in the decision on whether or not to invest in some particular company from this fund's perspective is basically government regulation. And considering the source, with someone or an entity of the magnitude of Blackrock, you'd assume that they have quite some influence over government regulations, at least through like lobbying and stuff, because that's not a secret. That's people know that's what happens. I mean, you have campaign donations, you have people actively lobbying in Congress or the Senate or whatever. That's not new. Just something to point out. So especially since ESG funds generally charge investors higher fees than normal non-sustaining label alternatives. And then they give an example of this new ESG fund. The fees are 5 times higher than some other fund that they offer. Okay. And it says it's a fund with a composition and performance predicted to mirror that of ESGU. So I don't know. It's just stating it has a higher fee. Maybe it requires more management. I don't know without looking further into the fund itself. So basically, there's not much, and then they go on to say like there's not much merit, or there's not much evidence to basically say that they're not just doing this to fill their pockets and make people believe that they are supporting the environment. even though the investments may or may not do anything. And they also talk about like how that this is not necessarily a bad thing, though, reading directly from the article, as if people believe they are investing in sustainable companies. It is normalizing a culture of prioritizing this and other investments and could induce others to be on the outlook for new opportunities for green investment. Some ideas for which have been explored below. And then they give other ones. They give other ones down here. Have First Solar down here. They have a solar farm that I used to drive by when I go down to Memphis all the time. I believe it's First Solar, and I think they're doing another one down here in the Panhandle as well. I don't remember. I read something about that somewhere. I looked into Brookfield a few years ago. I think it's basically mostly for the hydroelectric stuff, but anyways, that's pretty much the end of this. But I don't know, I guess major takeaways. There's Blackrock's got a brand new fund for you, and it's influencing a lot of investors depending on whatever. It is what it is. My biggest thing is like, even though like this article gives kind of a negative connotation, or at least I got a negative connotation of BlackRock from this article. So there's that. I'm sure there's another point of view. A lot of it, I don't know. With this whole green energy thing, it's one of those. With the companies, if the companies stand alone, I'm sure it'd be fine. But it's like when you have to essentially force capital into that, and you can argue that happens with like oil and everything else too, which most likely does. That's not the example that this article did. I'd probably say like 95% sure there is a solid argument the same thing happened with oil. I would be surprised if there wasn't, to be honest. But it's just something to keep in mind. Just kind of trying to go through and see what major takeaway. Because they got a decent amount of stuff in here. Honestly, the biggest takeaway that I can think of, I'm not very much of a fund kind of person. I like to manage my stuff on my own. I've always thought that like no one's going to care for your money as much as you do. And so why don't you care for it? I've always viewed, for me, it's a skill for life, not a skill for hire. And so I don't hire someone to do it for me. No, I talk to people and study, and I actually study this stuff or look into it and stuff like that. And a lot of people aren't willing to put in that amount of reading or study or anything else, which is fine. And then from there, you kind of have to specialize because you can't you can't read everything about the markets. You can't kiss all the girls in the room, so to speak. But still, if you do decide to do something, like if you do decide to like invest in a fund or whatever, just try to be aware of what's in it. Actually read the stuff they send you, and don't just like blindly put your money in anything. It doesn't matter if it's a fund or a stock or whatever. It's just with a fund, it's kind of more compact in a way to where you don't have to research all the individual companies. I mean, you can, but you don't have to do it to the same degree. And just be aware of what you're putting your money into. I wish that went without saying, but apparently it doesn't. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. So I hope you guys have a good night, and I will see you on the next video.